state security agencies and so on. And that's the issue that is at the center of the issue of the existence of the rogue unit and the work that is ongoing at that level. Now, and of course, as I had said, there is further work also that's still going to be conducted around these issues. We're just, for now, just reflecting on what actually is the issue. So, some of the issues that have been articulated at a public level attributed to an investigation of this nature as an investigation of either an individual or individuals. And that can't be true. What Hawks are investigating is the existence of such a rogue unit. And of course, the different sort of role players that were either there or not there during the said period, for an example, as and when the rogue unit was established in 2009. And therefore, it is part of an ordinary exercise to send questions to people that could have been there or may have been there at the time when some of these activities were taking place. And the fact that questions would have been sent to an individual does not mean that that individual is necessarily facing an investigation or is being charged for that matter, because those are formal processes as and when, for an example, the police decide that it has got to be so, to therefore begin to treat people as suspects on a particular matter and so forth. But in this case, questions were sent because they're questions of clarity and so forth. And there has been a strange question that has also been raised, which we find it quite strange, the question of timing. Now, many of you, for instance, you come from different offices as journalists to this particular venue. The fact of the matter is that it is possible that before getting here, you must have crossed a red robot traffic light. Therefore, it would be strange to expect that a traffic cop shouldn't give you a traffic fine for a traffic violation because you were rushing to this particular press conference. And therefore, if that traffic cop were to do that, that traffic cop would have been what? Complicit in one form or the other, or perhaps, for that matter, did not have a proper calculation around the question of timing and so on, because you were rushing to the press conference. The fact of the matter remains that any law enforcement agency deals with issues as they pertain to a particular matter before them, and therefore necessarily conduct what they need to conduct around a particular area of work and so on. But also the second point that I need to make is that it would be incorrect to expect that police officers must then behave like politicians, because they can't. In fact, if as a country were to reach such a state, for an example, then we must know that we are heading for trouble in a true sense. So law enforcement officers, they have got to do their work as and when they do it. They conduct it in, of course, in furtherance of the governing sort of principles and the necessary sort of stipulations, for instance, in satisfying their work. And that has got absolutely nothing to do with issues of timing. And I think it has been quite unfortunate that that matter has been raised. Now, the issue of timing, it's what we as politicians can always be concerned about and so on, and that's it precisely because the timing question is also part of a political act or a political tact in one form or the other. So that has been the situation, and I think it's important that we do want to make a call that the question of processes of this nature, for instance, have got to be respected at all material times. If there are questions that are being asked, all that is decent and fair for any one of us is to respond to questions. If there is, for an example, if I'm being investigated for whatever it is that I would be investigated and so on, regardless of whatever I may feel, but the fact of the matter is that process must also be respected. And therefore, I think it has been somewhat unfortunate that some of these insinuations have been made in relation to the work of the Hawks. Now, it is important for us that we have had to also step out and begin to talk to this issue, precisely because you'll also realize that other than ourselves, everybody else have spoken on this particular matter, and yet the Hawks do not report to themselves. They report to the Ministry of Police, like the rest of the other police establishment and police structure. They report there and so forth. So it's important for us to therefore clarify some of these issues, that indeed there is an investigation, and that investigation is a known investigation. It has been ongoing for some few years now, and that relates to the question of the existence of the rogue unit. And therefore, various individuals, of course, will be questioned from time to time, particularly when they were either in proximity or when they existed and functioned at a particular point when these particular matters arose between July 2009 to, let's say, 2014, for an example. But lastly, as I had said, that ourselves, the police, the Hawks, we got activated on the basis of a complaint that was lodged with us in May 2015, and therefore started conducting these investigations. Thank you very much.
We'll take questions. Yeah. I'll start with Marianne, as usual. Marina, 1, 2, 3, Gay, Carol, and Marianne. Okay. So I'll take 6 at a time. Thank you. Marina.
Okay. Marina Lampraat from Netwerk24. I want to know, why did the Hawks tell Minister Pravin Gordhan not to speak to witnesses if he is not being investigated himself? Can you confirm that he is not being investigated? I know you keep saying the unit is being investigated, but is it possible to investigate the unit and not Minister Gordhan? And then if you are investigating him, on what offence and by what authority are you relying on to put these questions to him? Thank you.
Thank you, Jan Bar for the Sunday Times. Minister of Police, you keep referring to the rogue unit by that name. Does that mean that you underwrite that description of the unit, which is not being used by everybody? Secondly, in what format did Minister Gordhan receive these questions? Thirdly, has he answered them? I think today is the deadline day. Fourth, he referred to some people who are interested in undermining institutions. Do you feel that the Hawks are among those units or parts of society that he was referring to? My penultimate question, there's a very, very strong impression that this is a matter of the President versus the Minister of Finance. What do you think that kind of impression would mean to our country, and whether it might be viewed as a banana republic and come into a ratings downgrade position? Finally, do you, Minister of Police, and do you, Minister of Intelligence, back the Hawks in this, or do you not?
I thought he's finished all the questions.
Good afternoon, Craig Dodds from Independent Newspapers. I suppose either of the ministers could answer this question. The equipment that you've listed, is it illegal to buy, possess or sell that equipment? And if so, where did this official buy it from and how? And then if you could also say what the charges are that you're investigating and in terms of what legislation. Thanks.
Just with regards to the procedure, if what happens in the event of Minister Gordhan not answering the questions immediately, I mean, is again following on from what my colleague Yanyan said, our understanding is that today is the deadline. The suggestions that he won't be able to. So then, what is the procedure if he doesn't answer? Let's say by today, then he has a week or 2 weeks in which to answer, failing which he will be subpoenaed. You know, what is the legal procedure going forward in the event of this. Minister, there's just a sense of deja vu. Also, one of the questions of the political ramifications or intrigue, or for lack of a better word. A few years ago, I think it was last year actually, when you were here, you presented a very comprehensive statement on Kandla. Subsequently, that was found to be sort of, dare I say, incorrect. So to what basis do we, how do we treat what is being said here with the necessary veracity and credibility, given the fact that previously that has been undermined? I mean, how do we know that you are, for lack, just to be blunt, are not acting at the behest of the President?
Thanks, Gay Davis. Eyewitness News. I'm largely covered by my colleagues, but I'd like to just go back to the issue of credibility, following on my colleague's last question. Just given the appointment of Major General Burning Lemeza as the head of the Hawks, and whether you're confident that there can be wholehearted sort of perceptions of his credibility, given what the judge had to say about his integrity and the fact that he lied under oath. The narrative around this being that people are leveraging political support to make personal profit, and that there is essentially a proxy war underway between forces that want to capture state institutions for their own bottom lines, against people who are doing what they can to defend the sovereignty of those institutions for the good of the country. And following on my colleague's reference to your defence of the eNCA spending and how that turned out for you, Minister, how can we sit here today and believe you? Thank you.
Thanks. It's Carol Payton from Business Day. Minister, if the complaint was made in May 2015, why has there been so little progress at this stage? Secondly, what is the complaint exactly, and what are the charges that you're investigating against who? And then going back to the establishment of the unit, as you said, it was originally supposed to be in the NIA, and then it was, that didn't happen. But was there not a cabinet decision to establish the unit in SARS, or was there no such decision? Thanks.
About it that is illegal, or do you know the individual who procured it for what? And just also to point out that the terminology of rogue unit only became used after it had been included in stories that the Sunday Times published after a leak. Before that, there was absolutely no reference to this, including in the Sikhakhane report. And the terms of reference of the Sikhakhane report were changed after the media leaks that there had been a rogue unit, and there's a dossier that existed by former members who had been suspended from SARS. So the actual terminology rogue unit comes from a dossier from those, and only entered the public domain much later than
April, you say, and then the terms of the Sikakani report were altered to include that. Could you just answer to those questions? But my colleagues have asked the other questions. Thank you.
Abonga Kobogana from the SABC Radio News. I just want to know, Minister, who is the complainant? Who was the complainant of this? And how did this complaint come about? Thanks.
Let me start perhaps with the last question. Who was the complainant? The complainant was SARS that laid a complaint on the basis of the information that surfaced at the time with the South African Police Service. Now, I find it strange that the question of what authority do police have to investigate arises. Now, the work of the police is governed and is dictated to by the constitutional mandate. For an example, we investigate crime wherever, firstly, it exists, but secondly, we also do follow up and investigate on specific sort of complaints. Now, and that jurisdiction is a nationwide jurisdiction that the police service has got. So I find it a very strange question that what authority does the police service, for an example, or even Hawks for that matter, have in investigating a matter that would have been brought to its attention. The terminology rogue unit, I accept that that's not the formal term, but it's what it has been commonly referred to. And for better, probably, consumption and understanding, I suppose, we also get caught up in referring to it as the national, as the rogue unit. It started off as a national research group, and then it changed. It became a national high-risk intervention unit at some point. And so it goes. But as you say, and correctly so, after the media exposés about the existence of such a unit, it kept on referring to it as a rogue unit. The gentleman refers to a perception that it's the president versus the Minister of Finance. And I'm happy that you use the term perception, because it is perception. And perception can't be fact and be factual unless you establish that as a fact and so forth. So I do not know where indeed that comes from. If a unit such as the Hawks or any other police unit, for instance, conducts its work and does its work, I do not know why it would then have to be lumped together with this picture that has been created, for an example, of either the Minister of Finance against the President or the President against the Minister and so forth. It just doesn't exist. And I think let us also not forget that that matter itself has also been clarified. In fact, there have been statements issued in regard to the same issue of perception that has been created. Is the equipment illegal? I think it was Mr. Dodd's question. Are you Mr. Dodds? Okay, thank you. It's because we also have a Dodds somewhere in our office. So it's whether the equipment is illegal and so on, and so it goes. And in this regard, I may want the Minister of State Security to talk about the issue of equipment and the issue. These are questions of clarity, and that's basically that. There is also another strange question. What charges are you investigating? How do you investigate a charge? because a charge is probably just about the final product. And I'm not saying the final product. You can only be charged once an investigation would have been conducted. So you start with an investigation. If your investigation leads to a situation where perhaps there are issues to be answered in law, for an example, and that's where the issue of charges there does come in. So I find this thing strange. It's in reverse. I mean, now do you investigate a charge? What charges are you investigating? It's that's. I think that's really a skewed way of and what legislation are you using? Again, it goes back to the first question that I'm saying. It's a strange question in a sense that the South African Police Service is governed by both the Constitution as well as the South African Police Service Act to conduct their work. And that's a known fact that it is within that particular sort of framework that the police service at all material times has got to function. Deja vu. The gentleman in the front talks about deja vu in Nkandla and so forth. Firstly, there's no, and you say that report has been what? Did you say set aside?
No, I think
you said it was found to be what?
Your report of Nkandla was simply found to be kind of like.
Who certified it? Who certified it?
Who? Sorry.
Who certified that report to be invalid?
I'm not sure. I mean, you guys were here. Well, what was discussed in the Constitutional Court essentially undermined the findings or the findings of your report.
You're also incorrect insofar as that is concerned, because the issue of the report released by the Minister of Police was not a center of contestation, for instance, before the Constitutional Court. You started off by saying it was found to be invalid.
I didn't use the word invalid.
You didn't? Okay. But that's what I heard. I'm sorry if incorrect. It was never found to be incorrect by anybody. There's also no judgment about that report. So you can't say it's incorrect. You can't say it's invalid. You can't even say it's irrelevant.
You stand by that report?
That report is correct. So and I've been saying this particular point, for instance, that the approach with regards to the work that we were sanctioned by Parliament to do with regards to the issue of security versus non-security issues at Nkandla and so on was a research approach, and that's what happened. So if you have got to refute or dispute that particular report, the one requirement is that you must conduct your own research, for an example, to therefore disprove and refute the report, the issues that were established in that very same report, for an example. And that's what it hasn't happened in this country thus far. Perhaps at some point it will happen, I don't know. But the fact that some legal issues arose before the Constitutional Court, for an example, and were argued and debated in the manner in which they were debated and argued, that necessarily should not be conflated together with the fact that there is a report that the Minister of Police had to produce on the basis of the resolution by the National Assembly, for an example, to conduct some work in that regard. If that report is to be refuted in any particular way, there has got to be a process that also would have to be embarked upon to deal with that. The issue of credibility, and this thing has been, oh yeah, by the way, there's also the issue of credibility. How can I now be, I think it does fall away, sir. You would agree with me. How can I now be trusted in terms of what I'm saying and so forth? I think your question does fall away in a sense that we now agree that that report, there hasn't been any judgment against it. It hasn't been set aside. It hasn't been found to be incorrect, for an example. until there's such an exercise that arrives at that, then you have all the right in the world to question the question, to raise the question of credibility, for an example, in terms of how the Minister of Police must have conducted that research work and so on in relation to the issue of the security versus non-security issues at eNCA. But there is also another matter, I can't remember who it is, that relates to, was raised by, I think, one lady here regarding the credibility of the Hawks head, DPSI General Ntlemeza. Now, again, I've been raising this question. You know, I've been dealing with this question, I think, over the past few months, because at some point the gentleman sitting next to Marina raised the issue. It was in this very same room, and said the judge found that General Ntlemeza is I'm forgetting the exact words and so on, but basically questioned his whether he lied or something like that and so forth. So that's what was being advanced. So he read it out, and the judge said, in his opinion, so he expressed an opinion, never made a finding, in his opinion, which is an opinion that can be made by anybody, necessarily not necessarily a finding or an order for that matter, because, and I think I had said that had such a matter been made into a finding, for an example, then my understanding of just basic understanding of what the law expects is that then in that case, General Ntlemeza should have been faced with charges pertaining to perjury, for an example, which, of course, in this instance can be precisely because there wasn't a particular finding or ruling in that regard. Now, let me ask the Minister State Secretary to deal with the question of what is being referred to as equipment, whether that equipment is illegal or not illegal.
Well, thanks, Comrade Minister. Firstly, we get to be drawn to the matter, those who knows, because we've been writing about it. 2014, well, it was not Sunday Times in our case that drew us to the matter. We were thrown in by City Press to say we are destabilizing SARS. We acted. Those who sit in our Joint Standing Committee on Intelligence, they will know. We commissioned an investigation by the Inspector General of Intelligence, and she did actually come to findings, and we reported back that we never did any destabilization like it was being purported in the papers. Well, unfortunately, we'll never get an apology on these matters. But what we could say is that the matter is subject of an investigation now. And because there's an inference about our involvement, we are cooperating with the police. Like all of us, we should. We are cooperating because some of the issues are most about the mandate we have and the players that are involved. Therefore, the question of the equipment that is very clear in terms of our intelligence laws, who must possess what equipment for whatever purposes. When the investigation is advanced, a determination is going to be made to say whether the equipment that were there in the hands of the rightful people that are authorized by the law of the country. It's not everybody that you can buy a jammer, can buy a surveillance equipment. There's a clear legislation to say who can have what. It's unlike some of the criminal elements that will always pursue individuals who possesses this equipment that has the intelligence capability to do, because they can't just belong to anyone. They must be properly authorized, and that authorization process is part of the issues that is subject of the investigation right now. But indeed, the equipment that Minister Nhleko has presented, they are equipment of intelligence capability. They are. It's without any shadow of doubt. How were they procured? Who had the equipment in his or her possession? Whether the right authorization were given or not given. Let's allow the Hawks and the police to come to that determination. Because if you have those equipments and you had no authority, the law is very clear, we have no authority. Well, then there will be the next question to say, what was it used for? Whether there were certain activities that were ultimately done. The question whether Minister Nhleko or myself were picking the Hawks is a very funny question, very funny, because we're not actually doing betting here or issues of lottery. Is a state. If there are certain acts that have happened in our country, there is a responsibility that those who are tasked with certain responsibility to do their jobs. Let's allow them to do their job unfettered and be able to do whatever they need to do, and then those of us who are supposed to account will account. That's why even in the case of my department, the questions that were being asked in terms of certain things that are related to this intelligence capability that existed, we are cooperating, and we will not be actually climbing on the rooftops to say what are we doing, because our teams have been working with the team there very quietly, including the SARS, to say what really happened here, and we need to be able to deal with those. Therefore, I will not be in a position to say here, while like in a football game, is either you support Barcelona or Madrid. We have just taken an oath of office to do what we're supposed to do, what the Constitution mandates us to do, supported by the other laws. From our case, like Minister knows, I've ensured that my team cooperates with the investigation, and where there are hindrances, Minister will always be able to unblock them, so that we can get to the bottom of this thing, because it has been an issue that has been with us for quite some time. We know that it has far-reaching implications. It has been in the public domain since we got into the executive in this fifth administration, and we need to be able to come to a conclusion on how these issues are dealt with. Thanks, Minister.
I'll take Pretoria.
There were answers not answered.
Question on, sorry, the Minister Gordhan. Yes, we do have a question in Pretoria.
Sorry, just for clarity, also a question that wasn't answered is whether Minister Gordhan is being investigated, and if so, for what offence? That wasn't answered, as well as why is he not allowed to speak to witnesses? If you can please answer that.
And a follow-on from that, please, Minister. In your comprehensive response was the notion of the legal process forward. For example, if he doesn't kind of respond, what happens then, please?
Okay.
Yeah, let me just deal with this particular tool. It's common cause that questions were sent to Minister Gordhan, for an example. But as I had said, those are questions, and are questions of clarity precisely because they are issues that the Hawks as a unit are looking at in relation to the existence of the unit. For instance, at SARS, there's this what?
Minister, our understanding is that the
you want the question of the deadline? Yes,
yeah,
yes, yeah. No, it's an important question. I'm informed, for an example, that an extension has been asked to the response to those questions, precisely because of the workload and any other thing that he's basically faced with. So, and that's where it is really. And that, I think, your follow-up question in terms of what happens then falls away in a sense. Yeah.
Is there a date possibly that you know?
No, not at this stage. I'm not aware of by when and whatever. But I'm aware that a request has been made in that regard.
Pretoria.
Yes, it's Leranza Temba from eNCA. I've got two questions, Minister. In January, we have information that you met up with the President to talk about this investigation into the unit, or more so to the Finance Minister. What was the President's take, if there was ever such a meeting? What was the President's take on this probe? And lastly, I mean, my colleagues in Cape Town did really ask this question, but maybe just to narrow it down, is there a law that says such a unit should not have existed in SARS to begin with? Thank you.
I'll take Carol and Meta.
Thanks. Yes, Minister, just the earlier question that I asked around whether Cabinet took a decision to establish this unit in SARS, or whether they never took such a decision, if you could clarify that. And then secondly, I believe Mr. Gordon is asking what offence he's being investigated for. Do you, can you give him any clarity on that? Thanks.
Yeah, hi, Marianne Merton in Daily Maverick, and I'm trying to, it's a couple of clarifications, let me put it that way. In our law, an organization cannot lay charges. It requires a real physical person to lay a charge. So when you're saying SARS made the complaint, who, on behalf of SARS, the actual physical human being, laid that complaint in May last year? Two, clarification, perhaps it's possible that the Hawks have a different standard operating procedure to anybody else within the police. I mean, normally if somebody breaks into my house, I go to the police station, I give my statement, a docket gets opened, and the police will put a charge on the docket. The charge may change given whatever may be unearthed in the investigation. So, what is the charge, the count, the subject of investigation on the docket that the Hawks are pursuing? And that, whatever it says on the docket, is arriving, because we are a constitutional democracy, from what law? Is it the Criminal Procedure Act? Is it the National Strategic Intelligence Act? Is it some other act? Because we don't just have police investigating willy-nilly what takes their fancy. They must have a basis in law to do so. Third clarification, and perhaps the Minister can assist, you did say that the Hawks report to the Minister of Police. Maybe you can shed light on why the head of the Hawks sent an information note not to you as the Minister of Police, but to your cabinet colleague, the State Security Minister. Thank you.
No, I think it's let's just take these particular questions. I think we run the risk of a repetition as well. Now, the lady in Pretoria refers to a meeting I must have had with the President, and I discussed, I don't know what I discussed, and so forth. So, in a sense, I think he would also agree with me that she herself knows that it is merely a hearsay that I must have discussed those issues that she refers to in the meeting when I met the President. And therefore, for me, the question that would arise, why would I have to respond to a hearsay, basically? I mean, we the question of meetings in the context of government work, for an example, it's a daily occurrence and so forth, but he refers to a specific discussion that I purportedly must have had with the president and so forth. So I think for me, I don't think it's really a question. Now, I'm sorry that I didn't respond to your question earlier on about was there a cabinet decision and so it goes. All I can say, I mean, even that one too, it's still a matter that forms part of the body of the investigative work conduct. If indeed there was a cabinet decision, maybe that will also come to light and so forth about the question of establishing such a unit. But I thought that Minister Mahlobo clarified the issue, for an example, about state security, for instance, has got a particular competence that is designated to it by law to exist in the manner in which it does, but also to acquire equipment in the manner in which they do, and whatever, but also to conduct its particular business in a particular fashion and so on. And I think he must have hinted, for an example, that is not what you would wake up, for an example, in your own sort of a newspaper house and say you want to have an intelligence unit of your own of sorts and equip it in a particular manner and so forth. I think he clarified that particular question. The issue of the complainant, who? You're asking who? Okay, the accounting officer for SARS is the commissioner for SARS. So specifically, it's him who went to the police and basically complained about the issue as having surfaced, for an example, and allegedly also on the basis of some confessions that were also made by other members of the unit. Again, I do not know whether Ms. Meten was here when I was explaining this issue. What is the charge? How do you have a charge before you complete an investigation? You mustn't. You see, you can't have a charge unless you would have completed an investigation, which then says, on the basis of this body of work that would have been conducted, and therefore, in this instance, these are the possible violations under these particular laws or whatever that would have been transgressed, and therefore you are facing this particular charge. So, and that's what I was trying to correct also earlier on, and I still do correct it, that it can't be that way. I'm still going to speak to Minister Mahlobo about him encroaching into my territory. I'm an information note sent to him instead of Mina and so forth. So really, it's a matter that must be investigated as well. And so this time around, we're going to investigate him. You do want to respond. There's a question which is about the second question about law and whatever and so on. Yeah.
Well, no thanks, Minister, and good luck with your investigation, because if we're going to be investigating notes. But on a more serious note, the question about whether there is a need of such capacity. We have to confirm that there is a need of any kind of capacity for any countries in the world. They do it. But the question is to say, how do you establish such kind of a capability? Who has the authority to actually provide that kind of information. And we're on record that after the investigations were done by the Office of the Inspector General, we know that there are certain mistakes that happened. We have agreed with the SARS that such kind of an economic intelligence capability is a necessity. You will not be able to run a country without it for various reasons, whether if you want to deal with the question of illicit economy, the law enforcement agencies is very important. Therefore, we have made that particular decision that we will do. But where do it reside? It resides with those people who have the necessary competence to have such kind of a capability. You can't put the capability anywhere. And how do you actually do the bringing of the individuals, the kind of the products that you have, and how do you have? We will always provide services. You know that there is an economic intelligence in our case that we are strengthening. You also have your treasury that has your financial intelligence center. We are working as a collective. This is one government. We don't work in a different way. But whether there's such kind of capability that existed in SARS was lawful or not lawful, let's allow the Hawks to be able to make that determination in law, because there is a matter of subject of investigation. But let's not have an impression that as a country, as South Africa, we don't need economic intelligence capability so that we can be in a position to discharge our own mandate in terms of our constitutional capability. You will always find it in anywhere in the world. But how do you coordinate your work? How to ensure that the practices and the conduct of those who are working within the system is within the laws of the country? Because at the end of the day, you don't want to prejudice people because of your conduct as a state. Thank you.
Let me just make an additional point here about the issue of, I think somebody was raising the issue around the question of the questions. I think it was Ms. Maten, for an example. Now, earlier on I had said and indicated that it's part of some work that also a unit such as Hawks also do from time to time, asking questions. Now, and it's not the first time that you would have an individual, for instance, being sent a set of questions to clarify certain issues and so on. I'm sure you would recall that at some point, for an example, when the current president was deputy president, he was sent a set of about 35 questions by the same unit, and he had to respond to them, and he had to answer those questions, and he did. So it's not out of the ordinary, per se, for the Hawks unit to pose certain questions. It's questions of clarity, for an example, to certain individuals. So there's nothing out of the ordinary when it comes to that. So I thought, let me just respond to that point, clarify that point. There's a point that I think Ms. Maten had raised earlier on. Thank you very much.
I'm going to give a chance because he hasn't asked.
Okay. For me, just a quick question, Minister. In total, I mean, you've said that the Hawks can investigate whoever is involved in this thing. In total, how many people are you investigating in relation to the outcomes of all of these investigations?
Paul, Marina, Craig. Yeah, everyone. Okay. You can add also, huh?
Good afternoon, Minister. Paul Vecchiato from Bloomberg. Minister Goran's office, about half an hour ago, sent a statement saying that they were not going to meet the deadline of 4 p.m. to answer the questions. Now, you said to us he asked for an extension. They did not say anything about asking for an extension. Could you tell us if an extension has actually been asked for, or if you're just under the impression? And if an extension, how long an extension? A week, 2 weeks, whatever it is. Secondly, Minister of State Security, this whole issue was kicked off by a woman called Belinda Walters. who laid a complaint, one of your employees, I believe. Is she involved in these investigations at all? What's her involvement? Have the Hawks minister, have the Hawks sent her a questionnaire about this rogue unit? Thirdly, have either of you ministers actually tried to meet with Minister Gordhan about this issue in any way? And then if not, why not? If so, what did you discuss? And then finally, how does this investigation affect relations within the cabinet? Thank you.
Minister Marina Lamprecht from Netwerk 24 again. Can you tell us the questions put to Minister Gordhan, was it put to him as a witness or an accused? Just a straightforward question, please. I think none of us are clear on that yet. And then also, it's the Hawks as part of this investigation, specifically investigating Trevor Manuel, who was Minister of Finance at the time, or Opa Magashule. Thanks.
Mine's just a question of clarity for Minister Mahlobo. I just wanted to make sure I understand your response correctly about the equipment. Is all of that equipment that you listed, does it fall within a category that is regulated by intelligence legislation? And all you have to establish is whether it was, whether the procurement of it was authorized and whether the people who were in possession of it had the authority to do that? Or do you still have to establish whether all of it is intelligence-related equipment or not? Thanks.
Minister of Police, you opened a whole new other side. You opened a whole new can of worms just now when you drew the parallel with the current president's situation, which took many years to resolve. He took his sweet time to answer those questions. If you're going to draw that parallel, and especially what we've seen coming from his counsel in court today, as I understood it with my lack of legal background, do you really want to take that route? And if so, what are the parallels that you see between Mr. Zuma's situation and the current one for Minister Gordhan, and what are the differences?
Let me just deal with some of these things. Because I'm sure some of these questions.
I'm not going to ask a similar question at all.
No, I know that I'm not going to ask his question, but is that you are beginning to swim in a vortex in one form or the other.
I'd like to believe I'm not.
You're doing what?
I'd like to believe that I'm not.
Oh, okay. Let me believe you.
Thanks for the indulgence, Minister. Minister, I just wanted to check something also. Given that it's been almost a year, more than half a year since May, you've used findings of Sekakani, of the Inspector General, and essentially you're suggesting, well, they said, and you're repeating, that there is a prima facie evidence that suggests that this unit was operating illegally. At this stage of the investigation, is this something that your investigators are also determining? Is there prima facie evidence at this stage of the preliminary investigation which suggests that the rogue unit was, or that some unit was operating illegally or beyond the parameters of the law?
So, Minister Chantal from the African News Agency, just very quickly, who else has been sent questions besides Minister Gordhan?
Thanks. I think I'm covered. Really, the question just runs around the capability of the unit and the fact that it was. What your response is to assertions that this unit was coming very close to investigating the activities of people who were politically well connected and who were not appreciative of the kind of attention that they were receiving. Thanks.
Mine is just double check, Minister, just to avoid to misinterpret you. Are you saying that there is no political witch hunt against the Finance Minister in all of this? Thanks.
Thank you. Minister, after you've had these two investigations, well, three investigations, and now the Hawks, and this has been going on for some time, since the very beginning of these decision authorizing the creation of this unit. Surely that would be like step one.
No, thank you. With respect to the question being asked about one South African who's purported to be our employee, who started the matter. Firstly, your facts are incorrect. I don't have that person in my establishment. Whether should we be saying a person was a source or not, I don't disclose sources in my work. But I don't have that person in my establishment. Whether the person is a source or something else, we don't give sources in the tradecraft. That's how the tradecraft works. But we have said is on record. The only time we got drawn to the matter is when a very long article appeared probably the 10th of August 2014 with headline, including our photo, some of us there, that we are destabilizing the South African Revenue Services. And as responsible leaders, we had to take action. We did take action to say, is it true or not true that we have destabilized another institution of the state? And the Office of the Auditor General came to a conclusion that we never did. And the purported senior managers that were said to be part of the destabilization campaign were cleared by the Office of the Inspector General, which is a provision we have in our own constitution that if the behavior of the intelligence officers is becoming untoward, we have to deal with. But the Inspector General did actually make a conclusion that there was an intelligence capability that was established there. It's a fact. Let's not try to be going in circles. It was there, and it was operating outside what should have actually, it has been done. It's a fact, it's in the report of the Inspector General. Now there is an investigation. An investigation must be able to respond to say, are those people who actually dealt with that particular issue where they acted lawful? Because most of the issues have everything to do with our intelligence legislation, whether it was breached or not breached. Therefore, those who are capable to do the investigation, let them actually conclude the investigation so that we can be in a position to do that. But a commission of inquiry was done. Therefore, to suggest that the equipment were purchased in a manner that was purchased. Remember, I've responded to say the equipment, you can only have this equipment as long as you have the proper authorization and you are the institution that is authorized by our own legislation. There are institutions that can have this kind of capability. And it's very clear to say, if we had no authority to do that, you must be able to answer it. How did you do those particular issues? Well, then there is an issue to say, what happens? There is no person who has the right, except the three intelligence services, to actually do intelligence gathering. It could either be your defense intelligence, your crime intelligence, and ourselves. And if you need intelligence, because intelligence, we do need it as a state, you should have that intelligence information in a manner that is coordinated, that is lawful to be able to do that. I think the issues of the equipment will only be able to assist the Hawks to say in terms of our tradecraft, because it means the equipment is an exhibit now and subject of an investigation. Therefore, we'll use our expertise, like as I was saying, we are cooperating with them. They can be the only ones to say, indeed, someone did the work of the state security agents or not. Whether the equipment was legal or not legal, what happened to the product, because there is also the issue whether the instrument was used. And if it was used, to what extent, and what do you do with that kind of information is very important. But more importantly, let's allow these agencies to do their part. Those of us who are affected will then be able to provide the support and answer the things we're supposed to do. Thank you.
No, thanks. Thank you very much. There was a question asked about how many people are being investigated. I thought I had clarified this thing. The investigation that is currently underway is about the establishment and existence of what is commonly referred to as the rogue unit. Now, in the process, it's possible that there could be a number of other people that would be spoken to clarify certain things about the existence of such a unit, for an example. So I'm unable to satisfy this question insofar as you know how many people are being investigated, because indeed what the core of the investigation is about the question of the existence of a unit such as the one that is commonly referred to as the rogue unit. I thought I had satisfied the question around the question of the extension. Now, if you do not meet a deadline, either way, whether for instance, I think that response is pretty sufficient. For an example, that the today's deadline could not be met. It's sufficient because indeed it could not be met. The reasons thereof, it's something else, and I'm informed that, for an example, there has been a request that has been, filled with the Hawks for an extension in this regard and so on. So I think the response from the minister's office was absolutely correct. So I don't see anything wrong about that. Now, the question of a parallel. I was not trying to draw a parallel, all I was trying to say is that, firstly, it's in the ordinary conduct of the work of such a unit, that if they have got questions that they want to pose and ask from any individual, they do so. So I'm making an example that to then say, in the past, this actually happened in relation to the Deputy President at the time. Whether it took, I don't know how long it took, to respond and so forth, it's not the issue that I'm reflecting upon. All I'm saying is that the question of posing questions.
It's not true that it took 5 years. That's not true.
Yeah, the minister here says it's not true.
You see, one of the things that is very important, your responsibility is to inform accurately. Let's not try to create an opinion that doesn't exist. That's not factual. Those questions that were asked at the time, there was a postponement. But to say 5 years is misleading the country. We shouldn't do it. We shouldn't. Because I know it never took long. I'm a South African. I know things that we all know what's happening here. Our duty is to report accurately. Then South Africans, they will be able to draw the parallels. Because if parallels are being drawn on different variables, it doesn't assist us. Thank you, Comrade Minister.
No, thank you very much for that clarification, and I think Mr. Yan is very happy with that clarification. Now, so I think that's what I wanted to say with regards to the question of what you refer to as a parallel. Ladies and gentlemen, what we clarified before you is the question of the work that is currently underway by the Hawks unit insofar as the issue of the existence of a particular unit within SARS. Now, and we do think that the issues that we have put before you, firstly, they trace the steps that have been followed and certain processes that have been undertaken. For an example, in the few years in question, and what each process eventually one process led to another in one form or the other and so forth as part of the ongoing work. That's what we brought before you. So the question of a political witch hunt, I do not know where it arises precisely because unless you were unable to follow the steps as and when we presented here before this particular gathering in terms of where the thing started and how it started and what actionable steps were then taken from one phase to another. The question of your step one is should have been step one and so it goes now. Again, I said earlier on before that the questions of whether there was such a decision or no such a decision by cabinet and so it goes is also a matter that would be unearthed by the ongoing investigation because as we speak, the investigation is not concluded, is an ongoing kind of process and so on, but ours was to intervene to then provide clarity in terms of what exactly are we talking about when these particular matters have been spoken about broadly and bandied up and about in the eyes of the public, for an example. So I think even that particular matter would then be resolved at that particular level. But I think it should also be understood. Somebody asked whether we met with Minister of Finance and if so, what did we discuss and so on. Ministers do meet from time to time. Now, and I think it should be understood that the fact that I'm Minister of Police, is Minister of State Security and so forth, does not make us investigators. We're not investigators. In fact, even in law itself, we have no right to question, to bring people in and say, yeah, what did you do? And this is whatever the allegation and stuff like that. It's not within our purview per se. So it's entirely an operational matter. For an example, if investigators they themselves had reason and cause to meet up with some people, for instance, in following through certain issues, it's in the conduct of their daily work operationally to actually do so, and it doesn't require us as politicians per se. Yeah, so I do want to leave it at that for now. Thank you very much.
Okay.